PECUN is Oregon's farm worker union. We were founded in 1985, so this year we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. In fact, last week we celebrated one of three celebrations that we're having up in Portland, and it went to a full house. It was great. So we want to thank our supporters, especially in Medford. We want to support UNETE. We've had a 25-year relationship with UNETE, with Dagoberto and his wife Kathy and all their members, Oregon Action, the Northwest Forest Center, among other groups. We've worked with labor here, with SEIU and a number of organizations, the postal workers. So we want to thank you for coming out today. So, Dagoberto was talking about like the working and living conditions of farm workers, right? And it really is an environmental justice issue, because farm workers on a daily basis are working with deadly chemicals. The working conditions are really bad. That's one of the reasons why we started PECUN back in 1985, when a group of about 100 workers came together in Salem, Oregon, and we formed the union. And it was really difficult because up to that time, organizing farm workers is really one of the hardest to do in the labor movement. Because first of all, farm workers are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act. Never have. So we don't have any collective bargaining rights, and that was specifically intended, because when the New Deal got brokered in 1935, that gave collective bargaining rights and worker benefits to working people to end labor strife back in the 1930s, farm workers were excluded. When the negotiations came down, labor was represented by the Northerners. The business community was represented by the Dixiecrats, right? And the Dixiecrats were plantation owners in the South that, when the deal got brokered, said, we are willing to accept a deal to establish labor in this country on the conditions that farm workers be excluded, because the majority of farm workers in 1935 were black. And labor accepted that deal on the condition that they were going to come back and bring back the farm workers into the labor fold. Well, we're in 2015 today, and we're still not covered by the National Labor Relations Act, right? And we see that in terms of the structural problem as being institutional racism, right? And today, the labor force has changed from African Americans to now immigrants. But as a result of that, there's a host of problems, right? There's Dagoberto talking about workers not making minimum wage, getting cheated out of their wages, working in backbreaking conditions. And these are America's most important workers, because these are the people that put, day in and day out, they put food on our table. And yet they're paying a price, right? We in America, we buy food and we eat food at a really low cost, right? But somebody's paying the cost, and it's the farm workers. The farm workers are paying the cost. The life expectancy rate of a farm worker is 49 years of age compared to 78 for the general population. These are some statistics that I'm going to throw out that we hardly ever talk about, and we talk about in the context of environmental justice, because that's the narrative that it fits in, right? But it also is related to another issue that Dagoberto was raising, was worker rights, wages, and environmental justice. In the county I live in, which is Marion County, we have 25% more cancer rate than the general population. We have miscarriages among farm workers. Women are 50% higher than the general population. We have, right now in Woodburn, we have an outbreak of tuberculosis. We have all these other work-related injuries that farm workers and tree planters have to live by. Arthritis, tendonitis, back problems, and so forth. And so there's something wrong with that picture, right? And we believe that that problem has to do with the fact that farm workers work on a daily basis with different chemicals. For example, it's not unusual to work on a strawberry, a caneberry, or a squash, or cucumber harvest and work with 20 different pesticides with those individual crops. For example, in strawberries, they apply more pesticides than any other crop, at least 20 to 25 different chemicals. Most of them have been proven to be carcinogenic. We're recently been involved with the Oregon Law Center in developing a pesticide education project, because the majority of farm workers now in the Willamette Valley, I don't know what it is here, but in the Willamette Valley is made up of mainly indigenous folks from southern Mexico. So just in our town, we have about 16 different indigenous groupings, right? From Oaxaca and from Michoacan and from Central America. We have a huge Guatemalan population from Huehuetenango in the highlands of Guatemala. And so, these folks, many of these folks don't even speak Spanish. So we've had to develop a project to educate people about how to reduce the risk of exposure, because these are dangerous pesticides, right? These are so dangerous. For example, in 1987, Pecún was born just 2 years into our organizing efforts, when we had to file a lawsuit against the EPA because the growers in our area were using a dangerous pesticide called Dinosep. And we were able to litigate that, and that same year we were able to get it banned. And so in 1995, the DEQ for the state they were testing the groundwater in Salem, Oregon, the capital of the state, right? And they found 7 years later, after we had got that chemical banned, unacceptable traces of Dinosep in the drinking water, right? I don't know what we would do if we were take this water that Dagoberto went to a labor camp and got. We don't know what's in it, right? But we do know that we have a serious problem in America, and for that matter, in the world. And I'll tell you this: there has never been a study done, a national study done, on the long-term acute effect of farm workers in this country. Never, right? We don't even know what the long-term acute effect is on the consuming public. We don't know. The only study that was done was in year 2000, going into 2001, by the Government Accounting Office, which is the investigative arm of Congress, that stated that over 300,000 farm workers on a yearly basis are poisoned by pesticides. That's the only study that's ever been done. There's been individual studies, small studies. We've been involved in some of those efforts, but there's never been a national study. In fact, some of the statistics I threw out earlier, they're non-scientific, right? But we know that in communities like in Florida and New York, California, Idaho, New Mexico, Texas, right? And where in every farm worker community, you can go to the health clinics and you can go to the providers, and they'll provide you with information, the same information that I'm providing you. We have a national website called Farm Worker Health, and you just Google it and you go into it. It's the same thing, right? So we have a problem in America, right? And yet, when we talk about sustainability, we're all for sustainability. We're all for eating healthy, eating organically when we can. But when it comes to worker rights standards are not on the agenda of the sustainable rights movement in this country. That's right. So one of the things that one of the things that happened to Pecún was we started developing a partnership with the Oregon Law Center, and we did this indigenous worker project, right? And in that, we were able to recruit a person to be part of our staff, and she's been with us for almost 10 years now. And I met her, and at the time we were talking about equity, right? Equality. And so the question of equality came in when Pekun was faced with whether we hire a woman or we hire a male to do this project, indigenous project. You know, where they had to meet the qualifications. First and foremost, they had to speak an indigenous language. So I interviewed the woman next to me, Carmen Gonzalez, and found out in the interview that she was a mother of 7, right? And you talk about equity issues, right? Then you start talking about, you know, a mother of 7 being a labor organizer in a union, right? And so we decided to hire her because we wanted to challenge ourselves, right? We cannot make change in this world. We cannot make change on the issues of equality or equity without practicing what we preach. So we hired Carmen, right? Mother of 7. She speaks 3 languages. She speaks 4 languages: English, Spanish, Mixteco Bajo, Mixteco Alto, right? And when I learned her story, I was just horrified. And so I brought her here today because she represents the work that we're doing in terms of building a labor movement that is really a movement that has to involve the consuming public, right? A little later on, I'm going to tell you about some of when we hear her story, and then I'll end the presentation. But during the question and answer period, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing about it, right? Because we are doing something about it. You know, we haven't spent 30 years of struggle, right, organizing farm workers without having a concrete solution, and I want to talk about that solution. But I want to introduce Carmen Gonzalez. Carmen?
Voy a contarles un poco de mi historia.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit give you a testimony, a personal testimony.
Yo emigré a Estados Unidos en los 80.
I immigrated to the United States in the 1980s.
Mis primeros trabajos fueron directamente los campos.
So my first work in the United States was working in the agricultural field.
Y trabajé 8 años en una nursería muy grande de Oregon.
I worked 8 years for one of the largest nurseries in the state of Oregon.
Después de esos 8 años, yo ya era señoría en ese lugar.
I was actually had seniority in that farm.
Entonces me empezaron a dar una responsabilidad de mezclar y aplicar pesticida en las plantas.
So I was given the opportunity to advance, and part of that responsibility was I was given I was trained to be a mixer and applicator of pesticides.
Y esto lo hacía de mayo a fines de septiembre.
So I would do it from May to September on a regular basis.
Y acepté hacer este trabajo por miedo de que me despidieran del trabajo.
I actually had issues with it, but I decided to take on the job because I was afraid that I would get fired if I didn't do the task that they were telling me.
Pero yo no conocía exactamente qué era lo que hacía yo en ese trabajo o las consecuencias.
I really didn't understand what I was doing in applying chemicals, and I didn't know what the consequences would be in my personal life.
Y lo hacía sin protección, sin guantes, sin máscara, nada.
So I did this without any training. We did it without wearing any gloves, any mask, any kind of protection. But I did it.
Los managers, los manejadores no les interesa el ser humano, les importa la producción.
So the management of the farm doesn't really care about the health and safety of the worker. They're just concerned about production.
Durante 4 horas yo tenía que sacar 10,000 plantas pequeñitas.
So in a period of a day, I had to transplant over 10,000 little seedlings.
No había descanso,
There was no breaks.
Tenía que terminar mis 10,000 plantas para poder tomar alimentos.
So I had to complete the task before I could go and eat.
En el 92,
In 1992,
yo salí embarazada.
I got pregnant.
Y una semana antes de los 3 meses yo perdí a mi bebé.
So just before completing 3 months in my pregnancy, I had a miscarriage.
Pero lo triste de esto era que yo no sabía que mi bebé estaba muerto dentro de mí por 3 semanas ya.
And I didn't realize that my baby was already dead for 3 weeks inside of me.
Y yo hablé a mi supervisora que yo me sentía muy mal, no podía ya seguir trabajando.
I went to my foreman. I would go to work sick, and I tell my foreman that I really need to go see a doctor if I could get time off.
Pero no se me dio esa oportunidad de ir a ver al doctor. Ella era muy
He never
estricta.
gave me the opportunity to see a doctor.
Eres la única persona que sabe hacer este trabajo y hay mucho trabajo. Lo siento mucho, hazlo un sábado o un domingo.
So he said, "You're the only person that knows this work, that could do this work. So go see a doctor on a Saturday or Sunday."
Y así fue, perdí mi bebé después.
So that's what happened to me, and I had a miscarriage, and I lost my baby.
Llego al hospital de emergencia, me dicen es demasiado tarde, tu bebé ya murió hace 3
I went to the
semanas.
emergency room, and they declared my baby dead, and I was sick. I was really sick.
Y yo me daba cuenta, me sentía muy mal cuando estaba mezclando y aplicando los químicos, pero por falta de comunicación nunca pensé que eso me iba a hacer daño. Desconocía los químicos.
So I didn't realize what I was doing. I every time I would mix and apply the pesticides, I would get sick.
Y cuando perdí a mi bebé, me descansaron por 1 año.
So after I lost my baby, the farm laid me off for 1 year.
Porque me decían que no podía regresar a trabajar porque ya tomaron otra persona en mi posición.
Because they told me that they had hired somebody else in my place.
Y yo les dije, bueno, está bien. Como siempre, una mujer indígena, gaché la cabeza y le dije, bueno, gracias.
So I couldn't do anything but put my head down and just say, okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Y en el 2005, gracias a Oregon Law Center,
And in 2005, thanks to the
Pecun.
Oregon Law Center and Pecun,
me contrataron para trabajar con ellos
I was hired by them to work with them on this project.
y empecé a recibir entrenamiento acerca de los químicos para poder llevar el mensaje a la comunidad agrícola.
So I was trained to educate myself on pesticides, and I was able to then go into the community and be an educator.
Después me di cuenta que los químicos son demasiado peligrosos.
And it's then when I learned that chemicals are really, really dangerous.
Yo lavaba mi ropa con ropa de mis otros niños.
I used to wash my clothes from work with the clothes of my kids.
Lo mezclaba por falta de dinero de lavar separada la ropa.
And for the lack of money that I had, I couldn't wash my clothes separately.
No
'Cause I couldn't
sabía
afford
que
it.
yo estaba contaminando a mis otros niños igual.
And I didn't realize that I was contaminating my children at the same time.
Y después aprendí muchas cosas que los patrones nunca te dicen dónde está la información.
And in that process, I learned a lot about pesticides, stuff that my my employers didn't tell me about.
Menos saber de las etiquetas, cómo leer.
And I didn't know what the labels on pesticide containers. I didn't know how to read it, and I didn't know what they meant.
Y así aprendí. Entonces ahora siempre encuentro a mis paisanos porque son los más vulnerables y les paso la voz.
So I've been educating my members of my community or my indigenous community, and educating them on the need to understand that they're working with dangerous chemicals.
Yo todavía tomé la agua que trae Ragoberto, lo usamos por 7 años.
I can relate to what the water that Dagoberto brought, because I drank that for 7 years.
Por falta de conocimiento.
Because I didn't understand.
¿Verdad? Hay mucha gente de mi propia región que no saben leer ni escribir.
There's people in my community that don't know how to read or write.
Entonces el proyecto de Oregon Law Center, gracias a la abogada Julia, aquí está con nosotros presente.
And I want to recognize a person that was really helpful to me and one of my educators. Julie Samples, can you stand up, please?
Alcanzamos mucha gente en la comunidad y ella sigue con este trabajo ayudando, apoyando, enseñando, educando a la gente y otros compañeros trabajadores.
So because of her, she's and others, we've been able to educate a lot of people in the community.
Ahora la gente, los trabajadores campesinos ya compran su botella de agua, ya llevan su galón de agua porque están aprendiendo cómo cuidarse ellos mismos.
Through the trainings, people are now taking their own water, their bottled water to the fields, and because they're educated, they're understanding that they need to do this.
Proyecto de Oregon Law Center ha servido muchísimo para nuestra comunidad indígena, más que nada.
The project of the Oregon Law Center has been a tremendous help to the community.
La gente está muy agradecida de recibir en sus propios idiomas la información acerca de los químicos, cómo protegerse, cómo rehusar de aplicar y mezclar pesticidas si no están capacitados. Pero cuando no conoces, totalmente aceptas hacer el trabajo que nadie más lo quiere hacer.
As a result of these trainings, people now know this because what we're doing is we're actually training the people in their own indigenous language. So they're now knowing, they're better educated, and so they're less susceptible to being exploited and not knowing what the long-term effects of exposure is.
Y yo estoy bien contenta de poder seguir en vida porque los médicos me dijeron que yo ya estaba en un día más, a lo mejor no hubiera ido a la sala de emergencia, ya no estuviera viviendo porque ya me había dado una infección en la matriz.
So I'm really grateful to be alive today because my doctor said that if I had waited another day that I would actually died. So I'm really grateful to being here with you guys today.
Muchísimas gracias por escuchar mi testimonio.
Thank you for,
es triste, pero seguimos pasando la voz a las comunidades la más vulnerable por no documentos, por falta de conocimiento. Tenemos miedo de hablar, de salir a la luz y levantar nuestra voz, pero tenemos voz. Lamentablemente no sabemos a dónde acudir. Somos intimidados por los contratistas, mayordomos, chantajistas, y entonces eso es lo que nos hace estar en la sombra.
So I want to thank you. I know my testimony was a little bit hard. It's hard for me, but we have to tell my story. You all have to understand that farm workers today are getting the raw end of the deal. They're being ripped off by unscrupulous contractors, by people that take advantage of them, and we need to do something about it. Thank you very much.